Thank you for joining us here at Tax Talk UK, where we talk about all things tax and consider other important issues and aspects of running your small business, being self-employed, working for yourself. So today we're going to talk about dealing with the consequences of going over the VAT threshold without realising, and dealing with that retrospectively. Before I talk about that, if I could please ask you to take a moment to subscribe to our channel. That way you'll easily be able to refer back to this information if you should need to, as well as being able to find other information that we have available on a whole host of different topics, all aimed at supporting you in your self-employment. And if you go to the playlist section of our channel, you will see them catalogued broadly in topics. So back then to breaching the VAT threshold and dealing with this retrospectively. So we talked in previous videos about how to deal with getting close to the VAT threshold and how to monitor that, and the things that you should consider. But inevitably, some people will breach the VAT threshold and not realise at the time that they've done so. One thing to mention is, if it is a genuinely exceptional circumstance that you don't expect to be replicated, you can contact HMRC and ask for exemption. So this would be literally a sort of a one-off that has made you perhaps have one large sale, much larger than you would normally have, and without that sale you wouldn't have breached the threshold, and you don't expect to have that again. That would be the sort of scenario where you could contact HMRC and apply for exemption. That doesn't mean you'll get exemption, so you do need to be careful, because if you apply for exemption inappropriately and it's not granted, then you're just delaying the time and increasing the amount of sales that you have to retrospectively deal with the VAT. So if you realise that you have gone over the VAT threshold already, perhaps you've got to your year end and you realise that it happened a couple of months before the year end. That would be a common way that it's picked up. Then the thing that you would need to do is to register for VAT from the date that you breached the threshold. So the date that your turnover for the rolling 12 months actually went over the VAT threshold. And again, we talked about this in more detail in other videos, so I shan't go into that in great detail. I wanted to focus more today on how to actually deal with that. So then you would need to account for VAT on your sales from the date that you breached the threshold and that you would apply to be registered from. Now, this can be costly, but it's important to try to minimise those costs. Now, of course, any penalties from HMRC will be related to the VAT amount. So by sort of trying to minimise the impact, can also minimise the impact of the penalties. Having said that, it is the most costly way to become VAT registered. So please still do make sure that you are monitoring, and that you know that this is really for exceptional circumstances where it's happened. So if it has happened, it has happened. There's nothing that you can do about it if you didn't notice. All you can do is, if you haven't reached that point, is make sure that you are monitoring and you understand what to monitor. So back on track then. Sorry there. If you breach the VAT threshold, you must register from that date, from the date that you breached it, and account for VAT. Now, there could be obviously quite a lot of sales that have happened in that time that you didn't account for VAT on. Now, in some scenarios, it will depend on your customer or client base. If your customer or client base are VAT registered businesses, it may be that they would be willing to pay the VAT on the basis that they can reclaim that VAT. So there's no actual cost involved to them apart from the administration of dealing with it and the cash flow issue. So I would urge you, if you are in a position where your customers or your clients are VAT registered, that you really take the approach of working with them to encourage them. They are not obliged to pay the VAT retrospectively, so you do need to encourage them to do that. So if you go in with a kind of arrogant and sort of entitled approach, then the chances are that that obviously you're not going to get any support from them. So you need to explain the scenario, ask if they would be willing. You will know your customers or clients better in some cases, and depending on the amount, it can be worth offering a contribution towards the administration on their part if there's lots of invoices to sort of cross-reference, and make sure that you give them the information in the clearest way. What you don't want to do is give them the information, especially if you've raised a lot of invoices in the sort of relevant time. You don't want to just go back to them and say, are you okay to pay the VAT? You can give a VAT only invoice, or you can do a full credit and reissue the invoices. Either's fine. Again, I would suggest talking with your customer or client and find out what's going to work best for them. Now, in that scenario, then of course, if you've raised £1,000 of sales and they are willing to pay the VAT, then you would just reissue either, as I say, just a VAT only invoice for the £200, or issue a credit for the £1,000 without VAT, and then issue a new invoice for the £1,000 plus the £200 VAT, and then you will have the £200 VAT to pay to HMRC. So in that scenario, there is the least impact to your costings, although still it's a lot of time to have to deal with everything, and have to deal with it urgently. So it's still not ideal, and it doesn't necessarily reflect well on your business to your customers or clients. So in the scenario where your customer is VAT registered, but they're not willing to support you with this, and they are not willing to pay the VAT, or perhaps you've got a non-VAT business or an individual then that aren't able to recover the VAT, then of course you likely wouldn't consider asking them to do so, because that seems unfair. What the best way in that scenario would be to consider the sale that you've received without VAT, that you're now having to account for, as the VAT inclusive figure, rather than a lot of people presume they have to add the VAT on. So back in the going back to an example, if you have made a sale of £100 and before you realise that you should have been VAT registered, then sometimes it is assumed that you must account for the £20 VAT on that, but as I say, it's not. It may be more appropriate to consider that £100 was VAT inclusive, if you're going to have to stand the VAT. And the difference on that, of course, is if you're saying that £100 was VAT exclusive, you are going to be then standing the £20 VAT on that sale. If you're saying it's VAT inclusive, then that means that the VAT element of the £100 then becomes £16.67. So it's around sort of £3.30 for every £100 that you will be better off. So again, depending on on the amount that we're talking about, that can quickly add up. But it does mean that you are you are compliant with accounting for VAT on all of your sales, but you're just minimizing the impact, because, as I say, there's not any particular reason that you would have to treat the sale as VAT exclusive. It could be treated as VAT inclusive in the scenario where you can't recover that VAT. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, that the penalties are likely to be correlating to the amount of VAT that you owe on the period for the late registration, so therefore minimizing the VAT as well as saving the amount that you're going to have to potentially stand, will also help with the penalties. As I said at the start, if it's happened, it's happened. You just have to embrace that, deal with it, and move forward. But if it hasn't happened, then please do take the time to make sure that you are aware of the VAT threshold and you are monitoring on a regular basis your turnover relative to this. So hopefully this helps you to understand how to minimize the costs of having to deal with a retrospective VAT registration. Thank you very much for watching, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel, and please do drop a like on the video if you find it helpful. Thank you. Goodbye.